Hi, how's it going? My name is Till. I'm going to be covering my presentation on my research paper topic, Beyond Exceptionalism, the Siege of Jerusalem and the Norms of Medieval Violence. I wasn't able to record with the presentation, so I'm just going to kind of show it from my tablet. Starting off with the table of contents I have, where I'm going to introduce my argument, go over some considerations that both the attackers and defenders had during a siege, and then a couple examples that kind of helped with my argument, and provided some examples other than just the siege of Jerusalem, but some others also during the First Crusade, some other battles, both Muslim, Christian side. First would be the ambush of Dorylaeum, which was in Anatolia, where Turkey is today. Siege of Antioch, Siege of Jerusalem, and then some closing comments. Also, just on this, I don't know if you can see it, I have a map from one of my books. It's just basically showing where the Crusaders went in the First Crusade, starting from Europe, heading into Anatolia, and that's where the three boxes are in the three battles that I'm covering. The first being Dorylaeum, and then heading down to Antioch, and then finally Jerusalem. And then also just wanted to show this. I don't know if you can see, but the middle one showing where Antioch is, the Crusaders are basically unchallenged, going from that area all the way down to Jerusalem along the Levant, and that was basically because just keep this here, that they received little resistance along the way, and that was because the Crusaders said that, hey, we're not gonna kill anyone as long as we get support, and that kind of constituted in the form of like water or housing and stuff on their journey down. So there's kind of a little bit more proof that the Crusaders weren't just killing indiscriminately. If they had reason to. I mean, it wasn't always the case, but it just kind of shows that. And then moving down to the argument, basically just showing that I agree that overall the siege of Jerusalem was a massacre. However, it was within the norms of that time during medieval war, siege warfare, and just giving a couple examples to kind of show that this was within the norms, both from the Muslim and Christian perspectives, and then in the closing comments I'll kind of explain why, and then I'm gonna first go over some of the siege considerations first, kind of show how that kind of plays into my argument. So for this, basically, just looking at, so from the attackers, I wanted to see kind of what they were going through, their mind process when they were going in for a siege. One of the first things was if the defenders, this is like an uncertainty, but that they questioned if the defenders had enough forces and provisions with inside the fortification to last, to kind of question their own provisions and if they can outlast, and then the stronghold value. This wasn't much of a case for Jerusalem because it was religiously important, so they were going to go in anyways. It wasn't just purely for gold or something like that, or strategic location, but kind of. And then was there a relief force? Like Antioch received a relief force, but Jerusalem didn't. But they didn't know that, it's kind of in hindsight. So going in for a siege, these are all kind of questions that, both sides kind of need to kind of consider. And also, I kind of went into looking at how this might affect the attackers, because both sides face starvation and disease, both on the inside, people are dying, and there's sicknesses, and outside you're exposed to kind of more severe weather and less food and stuff. So the morale was low, and so I thought the attackers, they're basically trying to hold out, while the relief force may or may not come behind them and kind of sandwich them in between the defenders. And so I thought, they might be kind of disgruntled by that time and coming in to kill innocents and stuff. But really, I mean, it was part of it. But really what I found was that both sides really practiced, killing non-combatants. And then I have a quote here: although most successful sieges resulted from a negotiated surrender, when a stronghold fell instead of by force, those within were entirely at the mercy of the besiegers. So kind of those thoughts kind of come into play, when they actually make it inside. And then I'll cover the ambush at Doryleum. I have one more quote here. This one saying that the Turks entered the camp killing pilgrim foot soldiers, girls, women, infants, and old people, sparing no one on grounds of age. And then the battle basically resulted in 4,000 Christians killed. Then I just kind of want to go into a couple. All right, so basically, sorry, it's kind of reversed on me, but basically they came in from the east on this graphic, and then towards the west you can kind of see the red and green, and this large kind of half circle is basically Crusader cavalry. They were basically defending against the Seljuks, or the Turks, and this is within Anatolia. This is kind of one of the first kind of battles that started, and this was a surprise attack basically. And also up here, right behind, sorry, it's backwards for me. Right in here, there's like a marshy area. They kind of use that as like a natural defense. I don't know if you've seen the movie The King, where the British use kind of the rain and mud to kind of trap some of the heavy French soldiers and put them at a disadvantage. I think that's kind of what they were going for. But regardless, you can kind of see from the top left, they came in anyways and kind of circumnavigated the front defense of cavalry. So, at first they were basically winning. And then there's another thing I wanted to show in this box over here. It's basically showing that, one moment. That they were basically stragglers in the back, kind of to the rear, and these were basically like pilgrims and non-combatants, carrying like storage carts and things of that nature, pilgrims, people offering aid and stuff like that. So all those people were basically killed indiscriminately by Turkish forces. And then going to the siege of Antioch. Sorry, let me go back and forth. Okay. So this was considered a special operation. Oops. Okay, I didn't use a map for this one. I wanted to use the image just to kind of show the soldiers going up the tower with a ladder. So most of the forces were outside. This was kind of like a night special operation, medieval special operation, where they had to use a ladder to come up and use bribery for to convince this Christian tower guard to let them in. And he did so. They were able to get a foothold, basically. And when they entered, they had a small force use a ladder to gain initial entry, to gain a foothold. And then they opened the gate and allowed the other Crusaders to get inside of the gate. And then once they got in, it was dark. They just kind of killed indiscriminately. They killed everyone. The Christian forces, Christian and Muslim, were living amongst each other inside of this fort. Or fortress. So once the Christians found out that there was Crusaders entering, they actually turned and offered their help. So they started fighting the Muslim population also. But just with it being dark and with men of both Christian and Muslim backgrounds having huge, like long beards, that they couldn't really tell friend from foe, so they killed everyone. It was pretty bad. But yeah, it's just, another siege just kind of shows within norms of this kind of thing, massacres kind of going on. And then that leads to the siege of Jerusalem. So I'll bring that up. And then by this time, they had made this whole journey down from Anatolia through Turkey all the way down to the Levant, and now finally to Jerusalem. They're just kind of tired, lack of supplies. They didn't have siege weapons on them, so they had an initial assault, and then they kind of backed off. They were being fired on with like arrows and stuff, and they didn't really have ladders to make it up this height, and so they began cutting down lumber and constructing their own siege towers. And then by the time they were able to breach, they were able to do so from the north. And then they gained entry, and then forces inside, some of them took refuge into the Tower of David, which is in the south. And that was basically, like a fortress within a fortress, like the citadel. And then once the force kind of backed off, the force to the south, they were able to enter too. Initially, they were kind of overpowered in the south. They weren't able to gain entry. And so Raymond of Toulouse, once he entered, he was kind of, he showed kind of more restraint than some of the other crusaders. But I think he was actually more financially motivated, because in a previous siege, he wanted to actually take some slaves and sell them, and he was denied and told he had to kill them. And they negotiated a surrender, and so the people, and including the Fatimid governor, which was Egyptian power at the time, this Fatimid governor of Jerusalem before the siege was in power. And so he was let free, and some others. It wasn't like a total massacre, but for the most part it was. They came in, defenders, I'll read this quote, majority of the defenders and thousands of civilians were massacred amid scenes of widespread looting by the crusaders. So part of this was, motivation, like based on honor and religious motivation. But when you think of like the Crusades, a lot of the motivation to join, well, sometimes was these weren't firstborn men of wealthy landowners. So if you weren't firstborn, the second, thirdborn, they were kind of forced to seek honor elsewhere. So they would join the Crusades, kind of make their own money. So some of this was financially motivated also. Just another layer of this. And then closing comments. So just kind of wanted to go over the Battle of Civitat. That actually wasn't covered in my paper. I just wanted to cover that briefly. That was the Peasants' Crusade. Before the main crusade entered Anatolia, the Peasants' Crusade did. These guys, they weren't like how you would picture knights and crusaders. They were just poorly equipped, and almost all men, women, and children, pilgrims, as part of this poor, crusade, were killed. And then the ambush at Jerusalem, which I covered already, and then the following crusades, the second, the Muslim began using siege warfare against the Christian fortifications also. And then another thing I want to cover was the siege of Jerusalem was overemphasized for its significance as a major religious site. So basically some of these other battles weren't really considered because they weren't as religiously important and kind of overlooked. And because it was a massacre, it's kind of concentrated on that. And then, of course, massacres were expected after, defenders resisted during the siege. Once they kind of gained injury, they didn't have any peace, surrender terms. So by the time they, it was forced entry, they had lost their own people, underwent severe weather and disease and all that kind of stuff. They just killed indiscriminately at that point. They're at the mercy of the attackers for delaying that long. And then the siege of Jerusalem was consistent with other sieges during the Crusades. I only covered a couple other battles in this one, not all of them that were in my paper, but just trying to stay within the time. I think I went a little bit over. I went about 15 minutes, but yeah, just wanted to cover all that, and that's all I have. Thank you.